Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Faith, Family, and Political Affairs. I'm coming to you today because there's a lot going on in the country. As you know, there's still quite a bit of fallout from the Supreme Court's recent ruling that pretty much gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Of course, many believe that in actuality, what that ruling does is seriously diminishes the voice of African American voters around the country, in particular in the Deep South, but also around the country. And we know that immediately following the Supreme Court ruling, many of the states in the South, including Tennessee, Georgia, Kentucky, I believe, um, and Louisiana, many in those states, the legislators quickly began to redraw their voting districts to pretty much exclude uh, seats that were pretty much expected to be dominated by Black voters, which many times will mean that, there's a Black representative or senator that comes out of that state. Although it doesn't always mean that, because a Black district can also vote in someone who is not a person of color. We know that to also be the history as well. But the idea is that a group of people in a location, like a locale, um, is able to elect the senator or the representative who will speak for them, okay, who will bring their concerns to the national government. And when you break up these voting districts that allow African Americans to elect the people who they want to represent them, then you have seriously taken away their voice. And this is also happening in North Carolina. I have to mention that because one of the senators there, Don Davis, has been a senator for many, many years and is much loved throughout the state. But his seat has been gerrymandered out. And it looks like he's not going to be back in the Senate, which will be a tremendous loss for African Americans in that state, in particular the states down east, which are and the small towns down east, which are very often forgotten by the politicians who represent the larger cities in North Carolina. Of course, many of you know that is my home state. I'm in Virginia right now, but that is my home state, North Carolina. So I also pay attention to the gerrymandering that is going on and the shenanigans that are playing out there as well, that are also seriously diminishing the voice of African American voters. I have to say that when the ruling first came down from the Supreme Court, it took me about a week before I could even speak on it. I mean, speak on it to anyone else, and much less make a video about it. It's not so much that I was surprised by this move by the GOP, the Republican Party, because the Supreme Court is dominated by Donald Trump's appointees, and they are largely conservative and largely represent the GOP sentiments across the country right now. And so I can't say that I was shocked by that piece, but I was heartbroken about the brazen nature of this move to curtail Black voting rights. And while the Supreme Court itself did not shock me, because we're very clear that Chief Justice John Roberts has been an enemy of the Voting Rights Act since it passed in 1965. And we'll talk about that later in the video. But I was surprised at how quickly the legislators in the various states responded by quickly redrawing the voting districts, something that usually would take, several months at best. And in one state, voting had already, I believe it was Louisiana, voting was already underway. In one election, some 46,000 people had already cast their ballots. And that governor stopped that election, trashed those votes, and said that they needed to work on redrawing their voting districts, redrawing their maps. And so, of course, there are legal battles that are challenging the legality of that because people had already cast their vote. Right here in Virginia, we had the referendum on the voting map that pretty much protected Democratic seats in the state. And the referendum basically said, let's leave our maps the way they are. And people went out and voted on that. I think it was like the 21st of April. People went out and voted on that and overwhelmingly voted to leave the maps as they were. And then the state Supreme Court turned right back around and reversed it and said the maps must be redrawn. In our country, even the people who are racist do not like to be called racist. Okay, but you know that old saying, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So if you move to diminish a right that all other Americans enjoy without protest marches, without protest rallies, without a Voting Rights Act, if you move to get rid of the one thing that protects their right to vote, and you target that one group that has had to do all this fighting through the years to secure that right, that all other Americans get by just being born in America. Okay. So, but when you move to take that away, it feels quite racist. And so we're at a point in America where we must call a thing a thing. And if it walks like a racist and it talks like a racist, then it most likely is a racist. That's where we are. For African Americans to not deal in reality right now, it's a dangerous proposition. You know, when Kamala Harris was running against Donald Trump for the presidency, there was a saying that was floating around the African American community: vote like your life depends on it. Because we kind of knew from Trump's first term in office, and certainly from the insurrection that he led and orchestrated, that he would not be a friend to African Americans. And then the playbook, Project 2025, was released. And of course, he denied any knowledge of it at the time and has since done nothing but implement every last bit of it. But so we were not shocked, by him at all. But what has been somewhat surprising is the silence of some of the entities that are in place to put a halt to a person who's gone rogue like he has. It has been shocking to watch the silent complicity, and then it's been shocking to watch the inaction. Very quickly, we just mentioned the war still goes on against Iran, that supposedly Israel spearheaded, and we were supposed to be like their support. Well, we're leading that. We are now. I'm sorry, it's not funny, but it's just odd. We are now blockading the Strait of Hormuz, um, because we're blockading the blockade, I guess, that Iran has established, that has pretty much shut down the ships going through uh, that very important port for oil shipments and other items. Farmers need fertilizers and stuff that come through there. But because the United States, brilliant military chief, Secretary of Defense, did apparently not think through what would happen if they attacked Iran like they did, which all of the other military experts say that would be the first thing that Iran would do: shut down the Strait of Hormuz. But this military group seemed to be shocked, and they came up with blockading the blockade a couple of weeks after Iran just pretty much embarrassed them on the world stage. Because before this brilliant war of theirs, ships flowed freely through the Strait of Hormuz. And even though Iran is a rogue state, defined that way um, around the world, even though that is the case, they were allowing ships to go through there. There was no issue with that until the United States decided to bomb them along with Israel. So, we still have that battle raging. And as I said in my last video, it is a puzzle that a president would pick a fight with a large constituency within the United States while also fighting a war of choice, as they call it, which means we didn't really have to get into it. There was no imminent threat to the United States. But why would he pick a fight with us, with African Americans, over something that we cherish? All Americans cherish their voting rights, but African Americans had to fight, die, and bleed. We have the Bloody Sunday memory. Representative John Lewis was one of those who was brutally beaten by state troopers going across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, crossing over from Selma into Montgomery. over voting rights. That's just one story. It could be said that the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church a couple of years before was also a part of that struggle. It's hard to separate out the different pieces of the civil rights movement that cost us blood and treasure to achieve the rights that other people enjoy by just being born in the country. Okay. And so as one of the young representatives out of Tennessee said, he said it feels like this was Representative Justin Jones. He said it feels much like they are spitting upon the memory of our martyrs. People who died so that we could vote, so that we could have the voting rights. Those names, that list goes on and on. I mentioned before the 3 civil rights workers that were killed down in Mississippi trying to help Black people register to vote. And he mentions Viola Luiso, who was a young white woman who was helping Blacks register to vote down south, and she was killed. There were certainly many whites of good conscience that were killed just for helping to try to make things right in the country. And so, but here we are. African Americans just led a movement that they have entitled All Roads Lead to the South. And it's sadly so appropriate. It's hard not to be emotional around this for us. But you all may just know Dr. King's name. But there were just regular, everyday people who got beaten up. They got sprayed with water hoses down in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I went to college. The sit-ins, the students from A&T and from the colleges around would go and sit in at those counters. They had milk and stuff poured over their heads, ketchup and stuff squirted on them. People were humiliated. So that we could have this right. And for Donald Trump and the Supreme Court, the 6 who thought that this was the right thing to do, for them to not honor that, the blood and treasure that we lost, is highly offensive. And as I said in the beginning, feels quite racist. And it took me almost a week to recover from the ruling. And I'm a tough old cookie. But it took me just several days to recover from that. It was like a gut punch. And then to see the reaction of all of the legislators around the South running to redraw districts that they know it's cheating. They know that this is cheating, but they're willing to do it. They're willing to cheat to keep the power. They're willing, but for African Americans, this is the reality that we have to go to bed with every night right now. That they're willing to cheat to silence our voice. It is as if I am standing in front of you and the memory of my grandmother and my great grandmother and all of the ancestors are behind me, and you reach around me to spit on them in my face. That's what it feels like. And the three young people on that are hosting Native Land Pod, you should check them out on YouTube sometime. Uh, Andrew Gillum, Bakari Sellers, and the brilliant Angela Rye. They have posed the question: have we let our our ancestors down by allowing our voting rights to be taken away this way? Their discussion was so emotional for me because it hurts me that people younger than me might have fewer rights than I've enjoyed in my life. And that hurts my feelings because my generation, we came in after those brave souls of the 60s kicked in the doors of segregation. And my generation went into these halls that used to be all white. It might have been a newsroom. For me, it was newsrooms. But on your job, it might have been a factory. It might have been a law firm where you were that first Black face, or you were one of two in 100 lawyers. You know, we were that generation called to go in and make integration work. And it was not easy. Of course, I had mentors who were Caucasian. I would not have been a good journalist had I not met Marion Gregory, who took me under her wing and taught me the tenets of journalism. Many others. So I don't, Jenna Connor over in Roanoke, Virginia, helped me out at the Roanoke Times as an editorial assistant, just always encouraging me to not give up. She knew I wanted to be a reporter one day. So there have been many white people. So I don't make my judgments about people based on that. I have likewise had many African American mentors: Joanne Poindexter, Melinda Payne over in Roanoke at the Roanoke Times helped me out when I was coming up over there as an aspiring journalist. And many people down in North Carolina who, if I name them all, it's a long list. But I say that to say we went into these spaces that had been mostly white, predominantly white. We went into predominantly white universities. I went to the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, which had pretty much the history had been an all-female school at its inception, and then invited people of color to come in. So, you know, we went into these spaces knowing that our forefathers had fought for us to be in these spaces. And we worked on being excellent so that we would not embarrass the ancestors. And so we would make them proud. And even though we were called affirmative action hires, and people questioned whether we should be in those spaces, we got in those spaces and we did those jobs well. So it hurts us that the next generation is having to refight battles that we thought were locked down. We thought the voting rights piece was secure. It's in the law. The 15th Amendment should have taken care of it. The 15th Amendment passed not long after the Civil War and the slaves were freed, which, when you write it in your history books, you like to talk about that. The Emancipation Proclamation. My granddaughter sings a little song about it where they're teaching her that, which is cool. That's all right. It did happen. But the thing is, as Dr. King said, you freed African Americans to the wind and the rain. Didn't give us that 40 acres and a mule that you promised us. And then set us free to Jim Crow a few years after we managed to build houses and find land to farm and all of that. And then you came back with Jim Crow and black codes and all this crazy stuff. And even though the 15th Amendment was on the books that said we should be able to vote, you came with poll taxes and you came with literacy tests. How many jelly beans are in the jar? How many bubbles are in a bar of soap? You came with silly, crazy, ridiculous stuff like that. So, we have not had a chance to breathe. As Terry McMillan so aptly said in her book about a whole nother situation, we are still waiting to exhale. And I think that's what was wrong with me right after this ruling from the Supreme Court went down. For almost a full week, it's like I was holding my breath. I was functioning in my life because you can't stay in bed all day. People will talk. You can't leave the curtains drawn. You can't not get up and shower and get your clothes on. You must get up. But as Justin Jones said, he went into the Tennessee State House and it was 2026. I love these young brothers. They are just on point. And he said he came back out and it was pre 1965. And it was like, how did they do that? How did they do this kind of back magic? God help us. But, God still gives us these young people to help us to know that it doesn't end here, praise God. This young Justin Jones and this young Justin Pearson, young Justin Pearson spoke at the All Roads Lead to the South. Well, they were both there. I happened to hear Representative Pearson, who is running for the U.S. Senate now, I believe. But he brings the ancestors with him when he goes steps to a microphone. He brings the ancestors, and you can feel it. And these two young men, we just pray for them, pray that they will continue to be safe and courageous and bold. And that they will inspire many more to emerge. Because my saying, when the people are ready, the leaders will emerge. And I would dare say the people are ready. And as I mentioned, the people at Native Land Pod, and as I mentioned, these two young men, and there's so many more names out there. Natasha Brown, I believe, runs Black Voters Matter. Um, Joteka Eddy, she is running, Win with Black Women, and they are spearheading the 1 million voters rising. They intend to register 1 million voters. They're focusing on the African American community, but they're taking whoever wants to get registered. And I must say, I admire their belief that it can still be turned around. They believe that this democracy can still be saved. I did. I believed it before the Supreme Court's ruling. I firmly believed it. But as I said, I did not expect the silence from the Senate, the silence from the House of Representatives, even though I know the Democrats don't have much power because they're outnumbered. But I still feel that the response has not met this moment. It has not measured up to what is being done right now. We are not fighting fire with fire just yet. And we could take a lesson from young Justin Jones, who took a replica now. He did not burn an actual Confederacy flag. He did not do that, but a replica of the flag of the Confederacy. He put a torch to it. And he said, we will not go back. And I think this is apropos. That is not offensive to those of us, as I said, whose ancestors gave their lives for this right. And for those people who, of whatever persuasion, who think that African Americans don't deserve a say in whatever goes down in this country, we beg to differ. And we don't intend to be begging, but we beg to differ. And so that is, I just wanted to comment on All Roads Lead to the South. And they called what they did on, they kicked it off on the 16th, which was Saturday. And they're calling this a summer of action. Okay. And they're asking people to locally connect with some organization locally, get involved locally, um, get yourself make sure your registration to vote and all of your paperwork is in order, and hook up to some of the national pieces that they're doing. And if you can't be on the street in any protest marches, donate when you can. If you have money, donate money. If you have time, donate time. But affiliate yourself, get active in this movement. Um, Again, the thing about African Americans in this country is just when we think we can relax and enjoy our freedoms come under fierce attack. And I have to say, just mention just briefly, um, because it comes to mind when I talk about freedoms being under attack. This whole Kevin Hart um, roast, where one of the white comedians felt that it was appropriate to make a joke about the George Floyd murder. Now, I didn't watch that roast. It's on Netflix, and I could have watched it. I was in 5 minutes, and the language was so bad. Cheryl Underwood was going to be one of the comedians speaking, and Chelsea Handler, and I like both of them. So I was planning to sort of watch it, but the language just in the opening was so bad. I said, I can't get through this. And so I didn't watch it. So I didn't hear these tasteless jokes about George Floyd. And for those of you who don't know, George Floyd is the Black man who was killed by a police officer, several police officers really, but one of them in particular pressed his knee into George Floyd's neck. At that time, it was said for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And I know that because Dave Chappelle did a whole video speech about that. So at that time, since they have changed the time that the officers stayed on his neck, but he died calling out for his mother. Okay? A grown man was murdered on the streets at the hands of a wayward cop. And so in this climate, one of the white comedians felt that it was okay to make a joke about that. You see, when you unleash uh, this kind of racism, this kind of racist behavior, again, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's most likely a duck. And from the Supreme Court, yes, from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to the President of the United States, who continually calls African American women low IQ, nasty, incompetent, however he feels like describing an African American woman, he will do it, and he will do it in front of the world. He knows he's being filmed. Anytime you set that kind of climate, you are unleashing something into the atmosphere that is going to cause African Americans to be targeted. It's going to lead to tasteless jokes. I mean, the streets of America were filled with protests, even at the height of COVID, when George Floyd was murdered in the streets like that. That was not funny. Okay. But in this climate, this comedian felt, you know, let's just try it. And that is the danger. You know that saying about boiling a frog in a pot? That's what it feels like in America. It's like they say to boil a frog in a pot. You don't turn up the heat right away. You turn it up gradually. Okay? Because if you turn it up too fast, that frog he might jump out of that pot. He might feel that danger. But if you turn it up just a little bit at a time, which it feels like that's what's happening with us in this country. And it's happening to African Americans first. But if you have not learned anything else from our history, you know that if it happens with us, it will trickle up, down, around to your community, especially if you are a community of color. And that brings me real quickly to the young Hispanic lady who just enjoyed saying the N word. And I'm just going to say it just because so that you can know how much she enjoyed it. She just said, "Oh, I just got a chance to call one of these people nigger. I just had, oh," she said, "and I haven't been able to use that word since I was in the Marine Corps." And she said, "Oh my God, it felt so good." Houston police officer, young Hispanic woman, talking about how wonderful it was for her to be able to freely call a Black person who she was arresting a nigger. The Supreme Court, the Trump administration, and all of these people who are behaving like racists are setting this tone. On yesterday, there was a shooting at a mosque. For those of you who may not know what a mosque is, it is a place of worship for Muslims. The suspects are reportedly two young Caucasian men who entered the mosque, armed to the teeth, they say. And it just so happened that three of the mosque workers were able to distract them and get them back onto the parking lot before they reached the inner parts of the mosque where many children were. But they clearly came there to kill some people. And they managed to kill three of the workers. Again, this stuff does not happen by accident. This climate is being set. This is the travesty of this Trump administration. This is the travesty of this Supreme Court. They are setting a tone that is diminishing the worth of the lives of African Americans, Muslim Americans, because they are not Christians. And this group of white Christian nationalists feel, I'm a Christian, but I'm a Christian who believes that other people have a right to practice the religion of their choice. I am not that Christian who believes that you need to run everybody out of the country who's not a practicing Christian. That's what these people believe. The word of the Lord does say, you should have no other gods before me, but he did not say you can't have any other religion. And nowhere in the scripture does it say you need to kill, diminish, disappear anybody who believes in a different faith. If that's in the scripture, the Holy Bible, please send it to me, right? Leave the messages in my comments. I would like to read that scripture. Christianity, in my humble opinion, the way that I was taught Christianity, is an all-encompassing. It's open for everybody. The word says the Lord will not come back until the word has been preached all around the world. He wants to give everybody an opportunity to hear the word. If he thought everybody was hopeless, why would he say that in the word? And if he thought anybody who believed in any other faith was just worthy of murder or disappearing or disregard, then why would he say, preach this word everywhere? I don't understand this brand of Christianity. I don't understand it. You know, the brand that I was taught was when the righteous ones came to stone the woman who was being accused of some misdeed that she may or may not have committed, that Jesus Christ stopped them from stoning her by saying, anyone among you who has not sinned, you cast that first stone. You see, this is the Christianity that I was taught. It calls you to first look inside yourself before you stone that other person. This Christian nationalism, I don't know where it comes from. But we won't get into that too much. There are just a couple of other things that I want to say, and I have some homework that I'd like to leave with my young audience. Because, you know, I'm a teacher at heart, a history teacher first, and then an African American teacher of history. But let's just say, I mentioned very briefly the Supreme Court Chief Justice. My second segment I entitled The Two Justins and the Two Roberts. My two Justins, of course, are Reps Justin Pearson and Rep Justin Jones out of Tennessee. And you know how I admire them, and you know why. And you know why I'm not the only one who admires these young men. But I think that they're good for this time and for these two Roberts who have come upon the scene in America. One of them, of course, being Chief Justice John Roberts. And just briefly want you to know that he is an assignment for you. For any of you who are graduating high school this year and going off to college, this is a man you should study. That's right, study. Learn all you can about him and study the Supreme Court. Learn all you can about the Supreme Court. Know your enemy. Anyone who would turn back the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is an enemy of the African American voice in America. And it is reported that Chief Justice John Roberts spent 42 years of his career planning, studying, learning how he might dismantle the Voting Rights Act. That Dr. King, Reverend Andrew Young, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Reverend Ralph Abernathy, Sister Coretta Scott King, Miss Diane Nash, Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, so many others marched and stuff. Okay? So Chief Justice Roberts spent the better part of his career planning how he would dismantle the work of these great civil rights icons. So I'd like for some of you to spend some time trying to figure out how you can dismantle the work that he's going to be doing as he sits on that Supreme Court for however long he is blessed to sit there. I would challenge you to study him and try to figure out how you might take down whatever it is he's trying to build. You see, it's not really tit for tat, is it? Because his people were born with the right to vote. Okay? So he's taking something from us that we had to fight for. So that's one of the Roberts that I would like to see our young people study. But don't just study him to admire him. Study him to dismantle whatever it is he is trying to build by taking away the voting rights of African Americans. And study the other Roberts, Kevin Roberts, who is the head of the Heritage Foundation and the chief architect of Project 2025, which is responsible for the firing of about 300,000 Black women who worked for the government and contracted with the government, whose Project 2025 is responsible for the dismantling of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives around the country. We have Kevin Roberts to thank for that. And he too has spent much of his career studying the African American experience. Now, this is something that I just learned a few days ago about him. I learned that Kevin Roberts did his master's on the slave families in Virginia. Now, if you know anything about the pursuit of a master's degree, you spend a lot of time with that text. Whatever it is your subject matter is, you spend a lot of time reading, searching out records, searching out history. You spend a lot of time with that information. That is what Kevin Roberts' master's degree was in. And then he was so interested about Black life in America that he wrote his PhD on Black families. He studied Black families, particularly those coming out of slavery. He wanted to know, how did they survive? And how have they survived since? And you would think that that would be admirable, right? Except he is the architect of Project 2025. He studied you to take you down. He did not study you to love you. He did not study you because he admired you. He studied you to learn your intimate, how you did things, how you stayed afloat with all of this coming at you at once. And what he concluded was that a key survival piece for the Black community is our community, and that it is centered, it is female centered. It's Black woman at the center, at the core, you see. But it is extended family. We support one another. We keep one another afloat. He studied that. And he studied how we depend on our faith. So it is no wonder then that he would write down, as he's trying to take us apart, that he would first take down the woman. Because if you discovered in your studies that the woman is at the center of their survival in America, then if you take her out, this is devious stuff. And I don't like to talk about good and evil, but this is evil stuff. This is dirty work. So he has a master's degree in you and how you do things and how you survive. And he has a PhD in you. And he is the architect of Project 2025. So, young people, I don't call it mission impossible, but I say it's a mission that, should you decide to accept it, it could keep you busy for a minute. But you must study these people. You must come to understand who they are. You must study their lives like they've studied yours. Not so that you can love them and uplift them, but so that you can understand when they come for you, you can be prepared and not shocked. I must say I was shocked to learn that he had studied African American culture that intimately. Because I wouldn't think that you could study us without coming away loving us. Because we are so resilient. We don't let anything stop us. We come through the fire without smelling like smoke. We come through with a joke and a smile. And we dress good. So it is, again, I don't like to say heartbreaking because it's not like I know Kevin Roberts or the Chief Justice, but it is heartbreaking that people would study you to basically take you out. But this is what we're up against. I'm going to leave that there. It's your mission should you decide to accept it. Study the Supreme Court. Study all 6 of those justices who voted to dismantle, to gut the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Find their names. And if you're on an HBCU campus, let that be your book club or something. That's your charge. And at the end of your 4 years, or maybe the end of your 2nd year, know how you would take them down. Not violently. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how can you dismantle what they're building to keep us out of the voting system. Search the Constitution, study the Constitution. Everything all these executive orders that Donald Trump is doing. How can you prevent that from ever happening again? Study the Constitution. Is there something that we need to, we know we need a Supreme Court reform. I spoke on that in my last video, so I won't touch upon that here. But we know they definitely need a code of ethics. Study Clarence Thomas, the one African American who voted along with this nonsense to take away our voting rights. He voted with the majority. So add him to the list of people you must understand why they do the things that they do and how they might be stopped. Non-violently. Because these people who are so violent and who are so good at inflicting violence on others are just waiting for you to say, hint at violence against them. And they're ready to sue and put people in jail like they did with Don Lemon and the young journalists up in Minnesota. So they can dish it, but they cannot take it. So I want to be very clear. I do not espouse violence, but I do say, know your enemy, study them the way they have studied you, and study them to dismantle everything they are building right now. Be strategic in your studies, if you're on a college campus in particular, but wherever you are, be strategic in what you're doing. Because we cannot allow this to stand. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up here. Want to just make sure that I hit all of the highlights that I wanted to mention in this segment. I certainly did. And while you're studying Clarence Thomas, be sure to look up Jenny Thomas as well, his wife. She is a piece of work. She was very supportive of the insurrectionists, Jenny Thomas, and was bold enough to make a call to Anita Hill several years after Anita Hill made her accusations about Clarence Thomas during his nomination to the Supreme Court. And if you don't know that story, go back and look at it. Go back and look at that history. You'll be glad you did. Anita Hill was a very skilled lawyer at that time in the EEOC, and working under Clarence Thomas' leadership. And she works now as a professor, a law professor. She's still around, thank God, to share her story. But she's moved on since and everything. But Clarence Thomas's wife had the nerve to call her years later and to suggest that she needed to apologize to Clarence Thomas. The audacity, the audacity of Jenny Thomas, an insurrectionist, okay? I mean, it just proves that people can have a lot of money and still be ridiculously ignorant. Jenny Thomas just believes so strongly in the insurrectionists that she was calling people, making calls while they were breaking into the Capitol, threatening to hang Mike Pence, the vice president, threatening to kill Nancy Pelosi. And as a note right now, your president, Donald Trump, has worked out a way to pay reparations to those insurrectionists. I think he had to the tune of $1.9 billion he has set aside because he was going to sue the country, and they worked out a deal that they only have to pay him I think it's 1.9 million, and they're going to split it up among the insurrectionists. Yeah, but they have no money for slavery. They have no money to even discuss reparations for Africans in America who survived the slave trade and who never got that 40 acres and a mule that were promised. But he would give insurrectionists who defecated in the Capitol, who broke windows, who marred the outside of the buildings, who messed up, desecrated the inside of the building, who beat up police officers that day. He would pay money to them, taxpayer dollars. And there's no public outcry. It's just happening. And there's nobody saying no. You mean you can't give people food stamps? You mean you can't give people health care? You mean you can't give the farmers the money that they need to farm their land? But you can give money to insurrectionists who wanted to burn down the Capitol, tear it down. Where is the public outcry? Where are the checks and balances? Where is the Supreme Court around that? Where are all those people who were putting on gas masks inside the building, Capitol building that day? They should be screaming right now. Impeach this man before he pays taxpayer money to these people. What's going on, America? Why are we allowing this? It is ridiculous to pay these insurrections. But that's where we are. So I heard that right before I decided to do the broadcast today. I heard that piece of news that he most likely will get that money. And then the latest piece of news that I heard right before coming on, and I'll wrap up after that, is the Republican Representative Thomas Massie has been defeated for his reelection in Kentucky. Now he's a Republican, so I'm sure that he and I don't see things the same way. But there was a common ground that caused me to pay close attention to him and to hope that he had prevailed in that race. And that is his support for the survivors of the Epstein sex trafficking ring. He had joined forces with Representative Ro Khanna, and the two of them were really leading a bipartisan effort to have those young women heard in the halls of Congress and across this country. And I admired him for that work, even though he is a staunch Republican. But he is of that group. He's not staunch MAGA, but he is a staunch Republican. But of course, because he was pushing to have the Epstein files released and to have these young ladies have their say, he became an enemy of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump went to Kentucky, which a good friend of mine who used to live in Kentucky affectionately calls it Klantucky. And that's all I will say about that. But Donald Trump went to Kentucky to campaign against Tom Massie, and he did lose his bid to be reelected. So this is the climate that we're living in. We must find our moments to laugh and to smile and to breathe. Um, I take it to heart because I paid so much, close attention to what's going on. And I believe it is my calling to stay ahead of the game so that I can inform you of what's coming down the pike and so that you're not blindsided. In North Carolina, be paying attention to what's going on with the Don Davis seat. I know he's so much beloved down there that it is heartbreaking to hear that he will not um, be in office, most likely in the coming years. So my prayers and my hopes are with the people of my home state because that's a great loss. That's a great loss. Um, and for right here in Virginia right now, and for across the country, particularly in the Deep South, my prayers are always with the people. And as I said, those organizers of All Roads Lead to the South included the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and several other, I think the Urban League was involved, several other groups, traditional civil rights group, and some of the young and up and coming groups. Thank God for their optimism and their unrelenting hope and faith that registering enough voters will turn this thing around in the midterms and we will be able to gain, the Democrats will be able to gain a majority in the House of Representatives and perhaps in the Senate. I hope and I pray that they are right. And while my faith has not failed me completely in this regard, I am surprised by the speed with which Donald Trump continues to dismantle this democracy. And I continue to be surprised, heartbroken, and disappointed about what seems to be a response that does not meet the day. I think that so far, the country, the people of the country are responding, but our systems have brought a knife to a gunfight. And our systems are not holding. May I be proven to be wrong in the midterms. I want to thank you for tuning in to this edition of Faith, Family, and Political Affairs. I think this is a time for reflection and hope and grounding in your faith and community, building community. Connect with someone. Don't be out here alone. In the most basic ways, it's not safe. Build community. Be around your family, protect your family, love on your family. Thank you for tuning in. This has been another edition of Faith, Family, and Political Affairs.